In this week's Torah reading of Bechukotai, there's a rough edge, 28 verses of curses that will befall the Jewish nation if we don't follow God's statutes. Included in the curses is the land not yielding its produce. For example, verse 32 states, I will make the land desolate so that V'shamamu aleh oivechem hayoshvim ba. It will become desolate for your enemies who live in it. The famous Spanish commentator the Ramban writes that though this verse sounds like a curse, the land will be desolate, it's actually a blessing, in that the land will not yield its produce to our enemies. The Ramban writes in the 1300s, En artsenu mekabelet et oivenu. Our land does not accept our enemies. Me'az yatzanu mimena lo kibla uma velashon. Since we left the land, it hasn't accepted any nation. V'chulam mishtadlim leoshiva ve'en le'il yadam. And all of them try to settle it without success. Is that true historically? Let's do a fact check. The Second Temple Roman historian Josephus writes about the abundance of the land in numerous places. Here's one example. It is an extremely fertile land, a land of pastures and many varieties of trees. The entire land is cultivated by its inhabitants, and not one stretch of earth is left uncared for. That's written during our sojourn there in Second Temple times. But when we are exiled, an about-face happens. Despite numerous settlement efforts by the Crusaders, the Mamelukes, the Turks, and the Arabs, they failed. A state of desolation replaces the abundance, and it's best depicted by Mark Twain in September 1867. He writes as he's horseback riding through the Jezreel Valley, there is not a solitary village throughout its whole extent, not for 30 miles in either direction. Of all the lands there are for dismal scenery, I think Palestine must be the prince. Palestine sits in sackcloth and ashes. The Talmud asks, what is the sign that the Jewish nation's return to the land is near? After a page and a half of discussion listing various signs, the Talmudic sage Rabbi Abba says the following: there is no clearer sign of the coming redemption than this verse. And you, the mountains of Israel, will produce your branches, and you will bear your fruit for my people Israel, because they are about to come. Indeed, today Israel grows over 40 types of fruits. For some of them, 50% of the yield is for export. We hold the world record for the amount of tomatoes grown per unit of land. In a hectare, which is 2.47 acres, Israel produces 300 tons of tomatoes. And where? In the Arava desert of all places. So there you have it. From abundance to desolation and back to abundance. As though it has a soul of its own, the land of Israel smiles to us through its produce. I live in Israel. I smile at the land every day. Hi, land. For those of you still in the diaspora, for whatever good reasons, how can you smile back to the land? By starting to plan your aliyah today. Shabbat Shalom from Beit El. Hey, you like Israel? You like Torah? Sign up for our Israel National Torah newsletter at the link on the screen.